how can we use AI to help us be better therapists, be better researchers, rather than it being extractive, right? Which I think
Hmm.
is a real fear, and
Yeah.
one that we need to attend to with most psychologists. Oh, they're just going to use me and throw me at the side of the road, and everybody's going to have an AI chatbot therapist, and I'm going to be setting up an Etsy shop somewhere, right?
Hmm.
That is a real fear that I think we need to address.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today as we go beyond the couch and explore the world of AI in psychology. I'm your host, Dr. Ernest Wayde, a psychologist and an AI strategist, and I want to welcome you to Beyond the Couch, AI in Psychology. Now, before we get started, I always want to take a minute just to thank our sponsors. So, a quick thank you to our sponsors, the American Board of Professional Psychology, also known as ABAP, and Wade AI, which is my AI consulting company. Okay, now on to the good stuff. So, whenever I speak with professionals, including psychologists, one of the questions that I get a lot about AI is, how can AI be helpful to me in the work that I do? And I think that's a really good question. You know, we hear a lot about AI and how it can help and how it's doing all these great things. But people always want to know, how can it help me in the work that I do? Specifically, as we're talking about psychologists, that's a great question. How can it help us as we do our therapeutic work? So we have a great guest today who's going to help us answer some of these questions. He's an expert in mental health technology, and he's going to help us really dig through some of these things. So our guest today is Dr. David Cooper. He is a digital health expert who is currently the executive director for Therapists in Tech, the largest nonprofit organization of clinicians working in digital mental health, which I think is awesome. Now, David is also an inaugural member of the APA's Mental Health Tech Advisory Committee, which I think is really awesome. I didn't know this existed, so I was really excited that this existed. So hopefully David will tell us a little bit about that. So with a background in clinical psychology, David has led the development, management, and implementation of digital health solutions with organizations like the U.S. Department of Defense, the AMA, and FDA, and other top U.S. hospitals on their digital health strategies and portfolios. So, David, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here and glad we talked about one of my favorite topics with you.
Awesome. That's also one of my favorite topics. I think we're gonna have a really good time here. But before we actually get into that, David, I always want to invite my guests to tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background. I know you have a background in clinical, but also tell us about how you got into tech and how you ended up on the APA Mental Health Tech Advisory Committee.
Yeah, so I think I'll preface it by saying I didn't start out in psychology. I didn't major in undergrad. I came out of undergrad doing something completely different and really didn't like it. Always had a passing interest in technology. Like I had a computer growing up using the internet, but I'm not going to be a coder. I don't want to be a developer. Um, and I actually went to graduate school intending to be a therapist and hang out a shingle. Um, but right as I was finishing up my degree, smartphones were coming out, and I was actually using it with brain injured patients. Like, hey, you've lost your memory or you can't focus. This is a tool that you can carry with you that's going to remember things for you. And I just was thinking, man, I wish there were people in my field smarter about this kind of stuff, because there's a lot of things we could do with technology as assistive devices in things like brain injury or even mental health, right? I got started thinking about this, like, we outsource so much of our brains today to technology. How do we do that in a way that can help us, right?
Yeah.
Nobody remembers anybody's phone numbers, but hey, can this thing help us in times of stress to like organize ourselves? And honestly, it was pure dumb luck. I got connected to a group working for the Department of Defense and spent 6 years building apps for service members around mental health. A lot of stigma in the military and veterans community about seeking mental health care. So, all right, if you're not going to come into the clinic, how do we get the benefits of the clinic out to you? So we were able to just, blue sky ideas and find problems that needed to be addressed. And it was great working with that team. But, after about 6 years, I said, cool, I know how to build these things. How do I sustain them? Like if I've got an app for suicide, that's a great thing. But outside of the government, like, are you going to run ads in something like that? Like, how does the money work? How do these things run as businesses? So went and joined a startup, worked with hundreds of digital health companies and hospitals, learning how the business works, joined Teladoc to learn how things work on a global scale and, advise them on their mental health products. And in the meantime, got hooked up with this group Therapists in Tech that was founded during the pandemic. Um, Loved having such a community where I could help people learn the things that I never learned. Like, I had to teach myself everything about tech and AI, a proud graduate of YouTube University for that, I guess. But, how these aren't things being discussed maybe in graduate school or things like, so how do we help the next generation learn and
Yeah.
adapt to these things? And that also led to the APA committee. I saw when that was first getting formed, um, they had a kind of an open call, and we're going to be opening up calls again as we rotate off members, and add some more new members this year. But was like, oh, this is something I love. I have to be on this committee and talk about this stuff, because I think that, again, as a field, we're not the most technologically inclined, I'll say. The stereotype is too much, but people like you and I that like AI and work with AI are not necessarily the most common in this field. So,
Yeah.
how do
We're the
we
minority.
how do we
Yeah.
help? Yeah, how do we help the community catch up? How do we help them
Mhm.
adapt to technology? And so was excited to help advise the APA on that.
Yeah, I love that story, David, especially hearing how you kind of had to bootstrap yourself in terms of technology and learning and just educating yourself and the experience that you had with the DoD is such a great, rich background in terms of seeing the impact of how technology can actually be helpful to people who are in need of mental health services. So I love that experience. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, David, because I know that you're actually really pretty involved in AI and how it can help with mental health
Yeah.
therapy. And there's a lot of people wondering, can it help? How does it help? So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of the things I do now is I advise a lot of companies using AI in the mental health industry. And a lot of what we're doing on the APA advisory committee is helping come up with guidelines around AI. We just published some ethics guidance about how to approach the use of AI in mental health. And a lot of it is really just, how do we get into the nitty gritty of this? We don't, um, one of my colleagues at the APA, Vale Wright, said, trying to stick your head in the sand and assume that this is not going to affect us is just not realistic, right? Like EMRs, like websites, like all kinds of tech, it's going to come for us at some point. So, how do we get ahead of it? How do we maintain knowledge and competence with these tools, again, without giving training directors in grad schools one more thing to do? Oh, now we have an AI requirement, or, but at the same time, they don't know how to approach this stuff. You've got AIs that can write papers now. I mean, one of the first things I did with ChatGPT back, when it first came out, was take some old test data and put it in there and be like, tell me about this patient. I took an old case conceptualization from grad school. I'm like, what did I miss? It gave me pretty good answers 2, 3 years ago. Now, I mean, it's going to give you really amazing answers. How does that affect what we do as psychologists? How do we incorporate that into graduate training? I think there's a lot of those questions around. Um, and so that's a lot of what I do, is talk with companies about how we can implement this and what are the good ways to implement this. How can we use AI to help us be better therapists, be better researchers, rather than it being extractive, right? Which I think
Hmm.
is a real fear, and
Yeah.
one that we need to attend to with most psychologists. Oh, they're just going to use me and throw me at the side of the road, and everybody's going to have an AI chatbot therapist, and I'm going to be setting up an Etsy shop somewhere, right?
Hmm.
That is a real fear that I think we need to address.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that because I think there's so many places we can go, but I think it's always let's start with the basic fear that a lot of people are experiencing.
Yep.
You know, the fear of I went to graduate school, I spent lots and lots of years,
Mm-hmm.
I may have lots of loans and debt from all those things, and now this
Yeah.
AI bot's gonna come and replace me. You know, I can understand the fear associated
Yeah.
with that. So what are your thoughts on that? What are you seeing in terms of the reality versus some of these conceptualized fears?
I mean, the reality is, I think we are dealing with a lot of these things at a societal level. Like, what is the future of work, right? You're seeing tech companies that are making record profits laying people off because they say they can do more with AI. So I think that is a really real fear, right? Especially if you take the people promoting AI in the tech world at their word of what they want to do with the technology, then yes, that is a conversation we're going to have as a society is what do we do when robots can do a lot of things? As therapists, though, I think we might be worrying a little much about AI replacing us. You know, the way I try to talk about it is self help books exist. We don't worry about self help books.
Yeah.
Psychics exist. We don't worry about psychics taking our
Hmm.
business, right? Like, there are things that people can go out and do to give them the information. There are things that people can go out and do that will give them what they want to hear, but they still come to therapy, right? They still
Yeah.
need a human connection. And I can learn CBT from a workbook, actually implementing it, actually understanding it, actually doing these kinds of things still kind of takes a human element because
Hmm.
we are humans interacting primarily with other humans, right? So I think there still is something to that. If I had to give like my most realistic doomsday scenario or the most realistic concern is that we see the same thing happening to us now that happened when CBT came out to psychoanalysis, right? You had psychoanalysis, everybody's going multiple times a week, and it's primarily for the wealthy. And CBT comes out and says, well, you got to go once a week, and we can do it cheaper and better, right? But there's still psychoanalysis, right? Like, it just becomes a little bit more rare, a little bit more upscaled. So worrying that therapy becomes only available to people with money, I think, is a legitimate concern, and that everybody else just gets a chatbot therapist fostered onto
Hmm.
them, especially for people on Medicare, Medicaid. I think that's something we need to certainly advocate against in our field. But whether or not we're all going to be thrown out and replaced by AI, therapists tomorrow, I don't think that's the case.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that perspective. And I think, especially, you make such a great point in terms of demonstrating how historically other things have come that may
Yep.
have been of concern, right? That may have challenged the work of therapists and therapy itself. But the evidence has shown that therapists are still around, right?
Yeah.
One of the 2 points that I always like to make here is there is more than enough work to go around. There
Yeah.
is a lot
Absolutely.
of work, more work than there is therapists right now, and I think that I don't see that changing anytime soon. And then I always like to demonstrate in terms of looking at how other industries are looking at it. And I think if you look at how the medical model, the medical field is looking at AI, they're
Mm-hmm.
looking at it as something that is augmenting the work that they do, not
Yes.
replacing
Yeah.
the work, right? And so talk to us a little bit about that. How can the field of psychology and therapists look at AI as a tool that can help augment the work that we do and help us do it better, even be more efficient rather than replacing us?
This is my favorite thing to talk about with AI because it's not doom and gloom. It's not what gets the headlines, but I think it's what's going to be the most helpful to people in the field. So, one of the things I love about AI is that it helps me automate the boring stuff, the stuff I don't want to do, the stuff I'm not good at. How many therapists practicing went to school to be a marketer, went to school to be an accountant, went to
Hmm.
school to be a social media maven, right? Like,
Yeah.
but that is part of the business of therapy is that
Yeah.
you have to be promoting. Great, offload some of that stuff to AI. Have it help you write a LinkedIn email. Have it help you plan out a social media video. Have it help you improve your website to get more traction in there, or even just ask it, how can I do these things? That's, I think, one benefit, like immediate, that anybody can start doing today. I think what we're going to see in the near term is these tools getting integrated into the EHRs and things that we use, right? You already see it with note takers, but thinking one step beyond that. Well, if we're collecting all these notes, audits become easier. You can query the notes if you have a, adverse event. When did they talk about suicide? When was the suicide plan made? And you can just ask it and it'll come back
Yeah.
with the answers. You can have it change your notes so that it matches whatever insurance wants to see, so that you don't have to worry about denials and going. Have it write the, pre-authorization letter, right?
Hmm.
In the field of psychological assessment, right? One of the things I went to school for was neuropsych, doing that kind of stuff. You spend all day writing one report,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
And it
Yeah.
has to, right, it has to serve so many different audiences. What if instead you could edit 3 reports a day rather than write one from whole cloth? What if we could take that report and then make a specialized report for for a primary care or neurologist, a specialized report for school, a specialized report for the patient, for the child, if it's a child in that case, and the family?
Hmm. Hmm.
What if you could do it automatically in another language for people that don't necessarily speak English? Maybe you have the kid who's a second generation person, the parents are there, but they don't really speak great English. Well, cool. I don't necessarily speak Hindi, but I can help, like, give you
Yeah.
something that gives you an idea of what's going on with your child. Like, those are the benefits that I see. Another really cool one too is, again, if I'm recording all my sessions, what if you got instant feedback on that, to, like,
Mm.
instead of waiting for supervision for, trying to remember what happened, you could get some kind of instant supervision on that, or
Yeah.
some kind of query, almost like Fitbit kind of thing, for
Hmm. Hmm.
feedback on that data to, again, help you be a better therapist.
Yeah.
That
I love
has
that
some
one.
promises.
I think that's such a cool one. A couple of things when you're talking about writing reports. I remember writing reports. I have not written a clinical report in a while, but I remember,
Same.
having dreading those and spending a good part of my day just writing those and really trying to make them seem, not like just being form and stock. But I think AI is such a great tool to help you do that, right? It can be really, it can be customized to help write the report for specific individuals. So I love that
Yeah.
approach. I love the thought that you're talking about in terms of supervision, right? Because AI can actually be used to help you provide feedback. And
Yeah.
I know there's a few AI tools that can do that really well, and I think that can be also really helpful for students, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
I remember when I was learning, I had a recorder, like a digital recorder, and I have to record my session and then have to listen to it back
Yeah.
with my supervisor and have to go over that. AI can really simplify and help
Yeah.
that be much more efficient. So I think that's a great idea. What are you seeing, David, in terms of the development of AI? Right, there's a lot of development in AI in terms of mental health. What do you think is our role as psychologists? What role, if any, should we be playing in this as things continue to develop and grow?
I think definitely we need a seat at the table, right, when these things are being developed. Mostly because I see the challenge and, I guess, problem of AI tools is now it is easier than ever to put together some kind of piece of software. Again, I am not a coder. I am not, by any scans of the word. I can do some minor technical stuff. I'm pretty good tech support, but I'm not going to be coding anything from scratch. I used AI to code a mental health motivational interviewing chatbot in 6 hours. Like, I was like, holy crap. So now people can do these things. The barrier to what we can do with technology is lower than ever.
Hmm.
So if there is not somebody at the table helping guide these things, bringing that experience that we have of our clinical training, our work with patients, that's where I see the bad actors come from. Like, I've reported companies because they're saying, "Hey, we're doing AI therapy," and literally no one at your company has a mental health background, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's wild.
Hmm.
Um, but there are companies doing it right and bringing psychologists in at a minimum level into the development of these things, bringing in their expertise, letting folks know, oh, hey, you're going to have to watch out for suicidal ideation, or this is what we should do when X happens or Y happens, or this is why it's good for it not to be overly sycophantic to a person and just tell them whatever they want to hear. And then I think too, In addition to that, I love seeing psychologists as leaders in the field, as founders of these AI
Yes.
companies,
Yes.
because I think that's where I'd love. Again, none of us ever went to school to start a company, and I think it is particularly challenging for a lot of us. I say this because I think it goes along with adopting AI tools. We're trained to not do anything until we totally understand it or we are certified to do it, right? You don't do CBT with a patient until you've had a CBT course or you had some sort of CBT post education certification. But with a lot of these tools, and with the tech field in general, it's much more like try it, see if it works, like leap and then figure out how to build the parachute on the way down. And so when I see founders, psychologists become founders of these companies, that makes me excited because it means we're overcoming a lot of these natural tendencies to be able to have more of a leadership role in these companies.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about there, especially psychologists playing a role. I have a pet peeve in that psychologists are experts in human behavior, and if there's a human
Yeah,
involved in any way, shape, or form, we should be there. We should be involved,
absolutely.
right? And so when we're talking about human behavior and technology in trying to get machines to behave like humans or mimic human behavior, whatever any
Yeah,
of that kind of stuff, psychologists should absolutely have a seat at the table.
yeah,
And I love the idea of psychologists actually leading those things, right? I think because we are experts in human behavior, we have so much. So the field of psychology really has so much to bring to this development of these AI applications and tools. I think one of the things that you mentioned that it really makes sense to me is really making sure that a psychologist is involved, especially when you have a startup, because like you said, the startup tendency is more sort of just we'll try it as we go, right? And I think that's part of the approach, but you need that psychologist approach to say, okay, but we need to be safe, right? And I think on the other side too, though, psychology I think also need to get a little bit more comfortable with
yep,
working in that environment that isn't completely verified and validated. Our training teaches that you got to make sure that it's completely done, and I think that's still good, but as AI is moving really rapidly, we don't want to get left behind, right? We want to
absolutely.
make sure that we're sticking along and around there. So, David, what are some of the tools that you use or that you're familiar with that you think would be really helpful for other people to be aware of?
I try to always encourage psychologists to try AI. The reason I say that is because most psychologists aren't even using AI, and the brand you've heard of ChatGPT or Claude or some of these tools. I don't think a lot of us are even using them. So my first push is always just try the brand name tools and try it in something maybe unrelated to your work. Try having it write a LinkedIn message for you, or try having it help you with your website. Try having it do some meal planning for you. Like, hey, I'm trying to feed a family of 4 and one kid only eats chicken nuggets. Can you come up with a shopping list for me? I think just getting people comfortable with the tool is the first step, because my fear is that if we don't learn how these things work, if we don't try them, if we don't use them, we're going to get how they are used dictated to us rather than having that seat at the table like we're talking about. I just gave a talk to some graduate students, and the way I kind of framed it was green, yellow, and red use cases of like, hey, these are things I need you to know these are things it can do. Here is a level of caution, I would say, in using them. So, like green things, like, again, social media, LinkedIn messaging, those kind of things, like have it do something pretty simple for you. Yellow use cases, well, okay, maybe that is using it to write a pre authorization letter or fill out some paperwork or write an email back to somebody. Or, hey, have a conversation with it, maybe about a problem you're having with a patient, not necessarily expose any PHI, but say, hey, I'm kind of stuck. How can I, think about things differently? And then red is where you really get into like, hey, have it help you write your reports and things like that. It can do it. I wouldn't recommend it, and or anything that puts your clinical licensure at risk. But
Yeah,
it's interesting to see, even if you just take, again, the first thing I did was just take raw data, no PHI, no nothing, just give me the raw scores, and I dropped it in and just said, tell me about this person. that kind of stuff, just so that you can see the output and the things that it does, that it can help spark some ideas in you to understand what its capabilities and limitations are, I think is really the first step for folks.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're saying in terms of at least start small, right? I think
Yeah.
it's something that I really hope more psychologists will feel comfortable at least trying it out for even unrelated things, as you mentioned. I think it's just try it out in your regular day, just see how it can be used, how it can be helpful to you. Get comfortable with it before you even
Yeah.
try to bring it into the clinical world.
I'm old enough, sadly, to remember the analogy of when the internet first came out, right? Like you first started doing, okay, we did email. Oh, okay, this is kind of cool. Then we did chat. Then we did shopping online. I mean, when the internet first came out, nobody's putting their credit card in, like,
Yeah,
absolutely nobody's doing
yeah,
that. But these things change and grow over time. And the earlier you kind of jump onto the tool and get comfortable using it, the more possibilities you see and the less disruptive it becomes when it as it gets, greater adoption.
yeah. And some of the things that I'm also seeing is even if psychologists aren't getting comfortable, the general population is getting more and more comfortable, and so people
Yeah.
are consulting with ChatGPT and Claude before they go to their session and bringing in their notes. And so, as psychologists, we need to get more comfortable and more familiar with those things, so that when someone brings in a note and says, "I talked to ChatGPT and here's what it says," we at least know what that is, right? And we know kind of how to approach
Yeah.
that.
That's some of the wild discussions I've been seeing on, like, therapist message boards of, like, different ways to handle that, right? Can for some people it's like that's equivalent to seeing another therapist. And I was like, I wouldn't see a patient who is seeing two therapists at the same time. Other people are embracing it, right? Like, if you look at it as a smart journal, I don't know, that could be pretty cool
Yeah,
and pretty
I like
handy
that
to
thought.
have
Yeah.
in between sessions. Or like some companies are doing, like, here's a podcast to listen to about your therapy session. And then I don't know if
Mhm.
that's right or wrong, but I know that trajectory, like giving our patients something more than a photocopied PDF that's been, printed off 18 times and is barely
Yeah.
legible to go with them in between. So, yeah, that's cool. I would much rather have my patients have that kind of thing. So,
Mhm.
how can we build these tools and how can we design these things so that AI is being used in a positive way that helps us is
Mhm.
really key.
Yeah. And so as you're talking about that, it's making me think one of the questions or some of the questions that I always often get is what guidance is there out there and how do we use
Yeah.
this as psychologists? Because it's not very clear and there's not a lot of guidance right now around how do I treat it? Do I treat it as another therapist or do I treat it as a tool that helps?
Yeah.
Or so what is the thinking of the committee and the Mental Health Technology Advisory Committee in terms of what can we expect to come out that can help psychologists who are feeling like
Yeah.
I want to use it, but I'm not really sure what and how I should use it in terms of ethically. What could we expect from in terms of guidance from the committee?
I'll say I'll kind of stagger it in order of things. I think first off, one of the things we've talked about as a committee and discussed a lot is that a lot of psychologists already have the tools within them to be able to tackle some of these questions. Um, there is a great article I tell everybody about by Tiffany Cheneville that shows, like, a crosswalk between existing ethical principles and the questions we need to ask about AI. So, yeah, and that's sort of the first thing I want to say is this is not something you need to be scared about or that is even going to require some kind of new crazy ethical code. It's like, no, how do we take the principles of beneficence and non-maleficence and just kind of think about these and crosswalk them through this new technology, just like we do with every other new situation that comes along. We're trying to help, of course. We release the ethical guidance. We're trying to discuss now about how do we do ongoing trainings. I know a lot of us give talks. I just did one for Center for Deployment Psychology on ethics in digital health and how to use these tools and how to think about these tools. We're trying to think about how do we have that training for folks to be able to do those sorts of things. And we're trying to think about how do we help both psychologists and consumers understand what good looks like in the field. What are some of the questions you should be asking of these tools and information that you should be requiring some of these companies to disclose to you before you feel comfortable using them? So we're trying to talk about ways to do that as well, and make that something consumable by the public.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that the concept of the framework. I actually have a framework that I use that crosswalks the existing, APA
Yeah,
guidelines to some of the things that you see in AI, the use of AI, right, in terms of equity, data security, all those things. As you said, it already exists. The framework is already there. It's just
yeah,
how do we apply that? So I think that's such a great approach to help people feel more comfortable that we actually have a framework instead of tools that we can apply to this. So I love that approach, and I think that's such a great concept. David, I want to tap into your expertise here and ask, what tip or recommendation or suggestions do you have for people who are, trying to figure out AI and or trying to get comfortable? What would you recommend in terms of how they can get there?
I'll say again, I did not go to graduate school to be an AI expert. I am not, this is not stuff that was ever in when we talk with graduate students when I was developing apps, they'd be like, how can I do what you're doing? And I'm like, I don't know. This job didn't exist when I was in graduate school. I don't know how to tell you how to get where I am. Um, but I think the thing that benefits us most from our graduate training, aside from the things that we learn, is our ability to learn quickly, right?
Hmm.
You start off graduate school, you know, a semester, I don't know anything about CBT, but in 3 months, I'm going to be using it with patients, right? We
Yeah.
learn how to learn quickly. And I'm proud to say I'm an avid student and graduate of YouTube University. And there has never been more resources out there to learn how to use AI or learn some of these things. In fact, that might be another use case I would recommend psychologists try AI out for. Go to
Hmm.
ChatGPT, go to Claude. I am a psychologist. I work in private practice. I'm really concerned about X, Y, and Z. Ask me some questions to gauge my knowledge of AI, and
Hmm.
then based on my answers, give me an outline for a learning progress I can do in 3, 6, 12 weeks. You'll be surprised at what it tells you. It'll give you videos and articles and all
Yes.
kinds of things to watch. So you
Yes.
can have AI help you learn how to use AI. Like, that's wild.
That is such a great idea. I love that. Right, that's a great place to start when you want to start using the tool. Start with the AI application and ask it to help you improve your
Yeah.
knowledge and your expertise. I love that. I think that's such a great approach. I'm gonna steal that, David, and I'm start recommending people to do
Please.
that. I think that's such a
I
great idea.
and if you want that sort of next level thing, I do that all the time with my own prompts and things that I work with AI is how do I
Hmm.
make this better? Or this didn't quite work. I got this output, but I wanted this output. How can
Hmm.
I reframe this to be better? Use
Yeah.
multiple AIs against each other, right?
Yeah.
You know, see what the input is, and you can kind of get this multiplicity effect.
Yeah, and one of the things that I come to do now more and more is I ask it to check its work and also to
Yeah.
like, is this the best that you can do? Right, double check your work and is this
Hmm.
the best that you can do? And I've been surprised with how much better it does when I challenge it to actually do better.
Yeah.
Right, it's surprising, kind of like a human being. You challenge and you tell it, hey, is this the best that you can do? You can do better than this, and it'll say, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Let me give it some more thought, and it actually does a better job. So it's great to see how AI can actually be helpful in that way. So,
Yeah, giving it some guidance, I think, is one of the things I found most helpful. Of like, hey, make a to do list before you start. Don't
mhm.
immediately start. Ask me some questions until you feel comfortable. Like, that's
Mhm.
another favorite of mine. Telling it what not to do, like absolutely do not do X, Y, and Z, and giving it some constraints, I think, is also
Mhm.
helpful. But again, these are all things I've picked up just using the tools and reading things on the internet. This is
Yeah,
not, you don't need to go for a certification program for this. You just need to be able to have the time and willingness to engage with the tool.
yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. I think that's the way to go. David, it's been such a joy having you on, and we've learned so much. How do people reach you? How do they contact you if they want to tap into your expertise or continue the discussion with you?
I'm always available. Come find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to have conversations with folks. Or if you're interested in joining a broader community of folks interested in technology in general with, who have that clinical background and are trying to navigate this, come join Therapists in Tech. We're more than happy to have you.
Awesome. David, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a blast having you.
Oh, this has been wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And if you have enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave us a review. Feedback is a gift, and we love gifts. So please leave us some feedback. But seriously, leave us some feedback and let us know how this show can continue to be helpful to you, because we want to make sure that we are providing what you need and really meeting you at your needs. So we hope you will join us again.